Hello, I'm Jonathan from PDFS Europe, and today we're going to be dishing up some sushi, but not exactly what you might find in a restaurant. This is ERM usage statistics harvested via the SUSHI protocol. So many of you probably have seen in the 2211 release notes that in 2211 we released an electronic resources management module, which we were very excited to do that. And that included functionality relating around agreements, licenses, and e-holdings. So in the past 3 months or so, our development team have been working on adding some additional functionality to that. And importantly, the ability for Koha to store electronic resource usage statistics. Now, this is a very important measurement for institutions to allow them to see exactly how their electronic resources are being used. Electronic resources are often very expensive, so it's important that value for money is gained from those resources. And this is a great way to be able to identify the usage of certain electronic resources. Now, there's two components to it under the electronic resources management module menu. Firstly is data providers, and secondly, a reports option. And that all comes under a new heading of usage statistics. Now, for your data providers, these are publishers who are able to provide counter compliance statistics. And there's a very useful registry on the Project Counter website, which gives you a lot of information, both about which publishers support which report types, but also information about sushi harvesting information. So if we just perhaps have a quick look at that. And let's just perhaps look for Wiley. So we've got some basic information about the publisher. We can see that this publisher supports Counter 5. That's great. That's the most recent version of the Counter standard. We can see the sushi server endpoints, the API endpoint, and what is expected in terms of the data you need to provide, the credentials you need to provide to harvest that information. So you can see here it's a requester ID and a customer ID. So this is information that the publisher would provide to you individually. And then importantly here, we have the report types that are supported by this publisher. So you can see that this publisher doesn't support item reports, which is fine. It might not be relevant to the data they're providing you with anyway, but we can see all the other report types they provide. So again, this is useful information when we come to set up the providers in Koha. You'll see that in just a moment. The data provider also has an area, which again, we'll see in a moment, where we can actually complete the SUSHI configuration information. So SUSHI stands for the Standardized Usage Statistics Harvesting Initiative, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it's a mechanism by which an application can harvest counter statistics from a publisher. So it's an ISO standard. So we have a new area for reports, and at this time we're planning to support Counter Release 5 only. So there are older versions of Counter, Release 4 and earlier. Because the vast majority of publishers and providers can support Counter Release 5 now, we don't actually see much point in adding earlier versions of that standard, unless there's a very specific use case in which we need to do so. But more likely we'll be moving forward with Counter rather than backwards as new releases emerge. In terms of the report types that we're supporting, there are 4 report types defined in the Counter standard, and we're actually going to support all of those. So first of all, starting with the platform reports, which all start with report name PR. So that's activity on a specific publisher's platform. So it's overall summaries, really, of platform usage. Database reports, they all start DR, and their activity relating to specific databases. Probably the most common and useful one is the title reports, which all start T, the report names. and that's activity relating to specific e-journal titles. So that's a good one to analyze which e-journals are being used well and which aren't. And finally, the item level reports, which are the IR report names. And that's really related to item level information, perhaps things like multimedia items and so on. Right, let's go and have a look at the module itself. So I'm just going to go over to my Koha system here. And we've enabled the resource management module within Koha. So that's the first thing. And let's just go and have a look in there. So on the left-hand menu bar, you can see the elements that we added in 2211, so the agreements, the licenses, and the e-holdings. But in the menu option below that, you can see a new option for e-usage, which contains 2 sub-menu items, data providers and reports. So we're going to start just by having a look at data providers first of all. And on this screen, you can see we've got a table here with the data providers that have been configured in this demo system. We've got the option to add a new data provider at the top left there. And in this table, we can see at a glance when we last harvested statistics from these providers, and also whether these providers are currently active or not. Now, harvesting can happen in one of 2 ways. It can happen either via the user interface here by accessing the Run Now button, which will trigger an immediate harvest. Or there's also an additional cron script, which will come with this, that you can run in the background, which is probably the more likely way that you'll be doing your ongoing harvesting, because you'll perhaps be wanting to pick up the statistics once a month or once every 3 months and so on. So regardless of which mechanism you use, the harvesting will only take place for active providers. So you can see there's one here marked as inactive. So that wouldn't be harvested by the background script. And if we use the Run Now button here, you can see we have a warning that this provider is actually inactive at the minute. So we have the chance to update the status, but I'm just going to ignore that for now. So as long as this status is set to inactive, this provider will be ignored. We've also got quite a useful button here, which is a test button. So when you've input your SUSHI credentials, the credentials for the API endpoint, you could test whether those credentials are working or not. So the SUSHI standards has a test endpoint, which allows you to just validate that the connection is working properly. So if we do that on perhaps this top one here, we'll get a little message that it was successful. So that's good news. That looks like all the credentials are set up and we're all ready to start the harvesting. Let's just edit one of these so we can see what the form actually looks like. So let's just perhaps edit the books and platforms provider. Hit the edit button there. And this template is the edit template, but it's the same template that you see on the create screen as well. So we've got some required fields, including the provider name. We can have description. Importantly, here's where we flag it as inactive or active. So we could switch between the 2 statuses. Report types is a required field. Now, as you saw on that project counter site, we can actually see here which report types are supported by this platform. So we might specifically want to configure one or more of these supported report types. And this is where we would flag that. So at the minute, you can see we've got TRB1 and PRP1, platform and book request reports. But if I drop down the menu, you can see a full list of all the available reports there. So I could select from that list and add additional ones and remove them if I need to. And then importantly, at the bottom of the screen, this is where we input the SUSHI credentials. So again, you can see that from that counter registry page. There's the endpoint there for Wiley. So that would go in there, along with optionally the counter release and your customer information, potentially an API key as well, depending on whether the provider uses that or not. So this is all information you gather from your publisher. Let's just cancel out of that for a second. Let's just go in and actually view this provider now. And on the detail page, we could basically see the information that we were just looking at just now on the edit screen. But in addition to that, we've got a separate tab for each report type that is possible to be harvested. So in this case, we can see it's we've got report types PR and TR, so they're title reports and platform reports. So at a guess, I wouldn't expect to see any information under items because that's IR and D reports. And indeed, I haven't got anything there, but I perhaps would expect to see some information under titles and platforms. So if perhaps we just have a look at titles, and there's information that's been harvested from that provider. We've got a nice table here, so obviously we can search within as you would expect. If I'm looking for a specific title, we can do that, which is quite nice. And again, we've got the platform information there. So we've actually harvested 3 platform summary files as well. So that's recorded there. We've got in those tables, we've also got an export option. So that's useful if you actually want to export this title information out into another application or into Excel or something else for some other purpose. That's there on the right-hand side. The other 2 tabs we've got here is firstly the manual upload. So the manual upload is there really for providers who can't provide a SUSHI endpoint to their system. So there are some publishers who don't have the ability or don't support SUSHI, but they can perhaps still provide you with a counter file. So we can manually upload a counter file. Perhaps if, say, they emailed it to you, then we could just import it here. So first thing we need to do is make sure that that report type is supported. So I think I've got a file here that's TRJ1. So I'm just going to edit this provider and add the extra support there for TRJ1. That's the journal requests. And now from here, I should be able to manually upload that file. So it's a very standard upload dialog. And if I go to that little small file of TRJ1, import that and submit that. Hopefully, there we go. Let's pop that into the system there. There's a title in there called allergy. So I'm just going to check under my title reports that it's there. Yes, that was one of the ones that was in that file. I know because I looked earlier. So we can see that's been imported. And finally, on this display, we've got an import log. So this is transactional information about either files which have been harvested via SUSHI or files that have been collected via the manual upload. So you can see here's the TR and PR files that I uploaded a few days ago. And there is the file I uploaded just now, that small file of titles. And the nice thing here is that we store the counter compliant files in Koha. So if you do want to export them into other applications, which there are other applications that will support counter, you can do that. So if I wanted to download that file, I can download it and use it elsewhere. And just to give you an indication of what these files look like, I'll just perhaps open this one in Excel and you can have a look here. So you get some header information, and then you get the very specific title information with the counts. That's the important thing that we're looking for, and that's the bit we'll be looking at in reporting in just a moment.